gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Wing It F1 podcast. I'm Freddie. I'm back on the pod after a few weeks away, and I'm joined by the lovely Nigel Chu. We were going to have the three of us back, but unfortunately, due to some...
Is it unfortunately?
No, unfortunately, Adam isn't around because of just some timings.
He's in Nottingham and he says his Wi-Fi is too bad to do it. That's his excuse. Unacceptable, I think.
Yeah, Nigel has done it when the Wi-Fi's been worse than it was in the Middle Ages. But anyway, if Adam's a guest of someone, we don't want to intrude. We'll wish him a lovely time and we'll see him back soon. Unfortunately, as you'll be aware, listener, with Nigel and I not being at university anymore and being full-time employed, it makes it a bit harder to do these, but we're going to endeavor to do this. And the summer break may well be a bit of a summer break, but who knows? We'll see how it goes. But we're here to talk about the French Grand Prix, not about us, even though we love talking about ourselves. But the French Grand Prix, yes. Nigel, what did you make of what could well be the last race at Paul Ricard?
I thought it was a good race. I think the first 18, 19 laps before Leclerc unfortunately crashed were incredible. They were pushing each other so hard. They were getting away from the field. That is the kind of like modern F1 that I absolutely love. Two of the top drivers pushing each other lap for lap. And it was just such a shame we were robbed of a race-long fight, I think, because I think that's what would have happened. I think Leclerc, they would have been on slightly different strategies, with Leclerc on fresher tyres. Maybe a two-stop would have come into play, or maybe not, but we'll never know. And we were kind of short-lived, really. Instead of a 53-lap fight, we got 18 or 19 laps instead. But it was still a good race. There was, even after Leclerc's crash, there was lots of incidents and action.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was a race that never was really, but it was enjoyable following the obvious turning point. I think obviously we should go straight into it really and talk about that turning point, which was exactly what happened to Charles Leclerc when he dropped it coming into La Beauce, turn 11. 10?
Yes.
11 of Paul Ricard. Who knows? I mean, it's turn 11, 12, 10, 14, 1006, depending on what layout you do. But it was on lap 17 or 18, I want to say. Max Verstappen just pitted. Obviously, you'll know this. And it had got to the point where we just really figured out the strategy that Ferrari were playing, which was an offset strategy. We didn't know. It looked like they were going to go for a one-stop or at least an offset two-stop. It looked like at the time Red Bull were going to go for a two-stop, definitely, but it turns out they were going to do a one-stop anyway. So even if that had occurred, it would have been a Ferrari hunt late in the race led by Charles Leclerc anyway. And it was becoming clear that would be the state of play because Max had got into the 26s in the gap and the pit lane loss was close to 30 seconds, to be honest. And then he didn't do anything different. He probably, previous laps, he ran out wide on the corner as everyone does, a long right-hander that tightens up, a bit like a really annoying version of the really annoying first corner at China, crossed with Luffield at Silverstone, in the way that it just kind of just edges the car. It's like, come on, let me grip. And it just snapped and went. And the abrasive surface and the Paul Ricard stripes meant that it didn't have as hard a hit in the wall, but he wasn't able to continue. He was out of the race. He somehow found the wall at Paul Ricard. And it was just an awful mistake, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And it's just so annoying. I mean, the thing is, he's only made two mistakes this year, Imola and this. But the problem is, they've both been quite costly. If you add it all up, he's probably lost at least 30 odd points. And against Verstappen, he doesn't really make any mistakes apart from the Spain spin. Apart from that, you can't afford to be doing those mistakes. That's what made last year. Looking back now, Hamilton and Verstappen, they did not make any of these unforced errors. Let's say, even though title fight was so intense, so ferocious. They didn't make those kind of errors, whereas Leclerc has twice, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't really practice that situation when the pressure's at its highest, when you're having to push and the tires are, on the limit. So you can't really, it's not like someone can tell him where to improve or how to do something better. It's just something he has to try and not do, and just that situation will only come about again when it might be next race, it might be 2 or 3 races down the line. But yeah, it's not good. 63 points behind is a long way to come back from, and with Ferrari's other issues as well, it's going to be difficult for Leclerc. And like I said, it's just such a shame because he was driving so well up until then. To keep Verstappen behind, I think most other drivers would have lost out to Verstappen because Leclerc didn't over-defend. He only defended once into Le Beausset. That was at the right time as well because Verstappen was going to dive down inside. Other than that, he didn't over-defend. He didn't defend into the chicane like a few other drivers did, like Russell did, for instance, later in the race, and then compromise his exit. He didn't do any of that. So he was driving such a good race up until then. So just a massive shame.
Totally, completely agree with that. It was a massive shame, and he was driving excellently. And there'd been so much talk about whether Ferrari's contra setup strategy to Red Bull was going to work, or whether Red Bull was going to be able to just to breeze past like they were able to early in the season. And it was working because they were able to pull so much. I think the stat I've heard was that through Le Beausset, the corner where Leclerc crashed, that at points in that, but the average amount of speed that they were able to take through that was higher than the Rebels was 15 kilometers an hour through that one corner. That's insane. And you'd look through sector 3, you look at the gap, and obviously you say that Verstappen obviously forced him to defend rightly at points there, and he was still able to be at 8/10 when they were crossing the line from 2/10, 3/10 gap, and that's insane. That they managed to play it really well. It's proper old 2011 Red Bull tactics, to be honest, that were working against them. It's just he dropped it, and that's what she wrote, to be honest. So there's not really much to say on that apart from how do you think it would have played out?
It's impossible to say. I think he would have won. I think he had the pace. I think Ferrari. Yeah. For me, Ferrari had a slight. Well, actually, they were pretty equal in France. I don't know. I think he would have. I think he would have gone up to 5-6 laps longer, perhaps, and that is a quite big tyre delta. And I think he could have attacked. Would he have been able to do anything about Red Bull straight line speed? Not sure, but I had a feeling that he would have won.
Yeah, I had a feeling that he could have done a nice little move into turn 3 or into the final corner. I kind of thought, I was thinking well, actually, we're seeing a little bit of racing around here, and that's where the car's strong. That could be very interesting. And then he crashed, which put hay to that. And, the final corner at Magny-Cours anyway for 2024 is pretty good for last lap overtakes. You just have to, for a Ferrari, you just have to ask Rubens Barrichello. What a throwback that was.
What year was that?
2004. And because they sacked Jarno Trulli because of it.
What a memorable season that was, eh? 2004.
Yeah.
Up there with 2015.
To be honest, 2 of the seasons I probably had my most kind of knowledge of F1 from, if that makes sense. Anyway. 2015 was one of the first seasons I properly watched as a nerd, and 2004 was when I was a kid, when I was first probably like, oh, F1. Well, actually, it was probably before that, but anyway. There we go. There's an insight for you guys. But yeah, that's enough Charles Leclerc commiseration, because I think we all wanted Leclerc to win that race for the title fight. Nigel and I's neutrals root for the 3-point gap, not the 63-point gap, and it's a huge gap. I think if we try and crunch the numbers in modern point system, obviously that's not being closed. If we try and figure it out for old point system, it's about a 25-26 point gap, I think. So I don't know if that's been closed in the old point system. I can't remember any of the Schumacher-Hakkinen gaps and stuff like that.
Well, whatever it is, the problem is Red Bull and Verstappen. That combination is a massive. Well, it's probably the toughest thing to beat because Verstappen's not going to make any mistakes. Red Bull's reliability seems to be okay. Verstappen could also play things a bit safer. That's the that's the problem. Even if Ferrari have the fastest car for the final 10 races, it doesn't really matter, especially if they're gonna, Ferrari is still gonna have problems. They're gonna have grid penalties as well. Leclerc has got to take a grid penalty at some point, as well. So that is the problem, really.
Verstappen can kind of afford to already play Rosberg, which is insane for where the title fight is where the season is. But anyway, arguably we've had one of the biggest turning points in the season already, unless Leclerc can bring it back. And if he wins every race and Verstappen is allowed, only gets like 3 or 4 fastest laps when he's in second, then who knows? But that would be a hell of a comeback. That would be very, very movie. But anyway, we should touch on the winner, obviously, Max Verstappen. He was always in threat to Ferrari, let's be honest. I mean, we can sit here and say how good Ferrari were until they weren't. Red Bull were always in threat, and they were always closing, and they were always close to the win, and they were the pre-race favourite. And that's his 7th win of the year?
Yes, I think, yes.
Something like that. But yeah, I mean, do you reckon, has he got 2 hands on the trophy yet, or is it just one then?
I mean, he's got a finger on it. I'm not, I don't get too ahead of myself. But like I said, apart from that one mistake in Spain, he's driven pretty well. And the gap to Perez, the race pace difference between Verstappen and Perez was, pretty big this weekend. Even though Perez did get close in qualifying, which credit for, in the race, Verstappen was, quite a bit ahead. So, he doesn't have any weaknesses, I think. Hamilton and Verstappen, they don't have any weaknesses. Well, but right now, I'd say Verstappen doesn't have a weakness. And if you're up against someone like that, how do you beat them? You've got to have the best car, and you've got to not bin it. So, there.
I think you're right. He's untouchable. He's untouchable, and you kind of I put it this way: like, if it was Max Verstappen who had the 63-point gap at this point, but Red Bull were operating so well, I would trust them to be able to be in this fight. I don't, in the way that I don't trust Ferrari. Not because of Leclerc, more because of the team. This is kind of a side of it, but I can trust Verstappen to, if he makes a mistake, for it to not be a costly mistake. But I don't have that level of faith in Leclerc at the moment. And obviously that's because Leclerc is such an aggressive driver. If you want to just watch the pole lap from Singapore in 2019, that's how you learn how Leclerc drives, and that's how you learn how Leclerc can crash so easily. But anyway, I think Verstappen, just, even though he's so aggressive, he's deft, and he's aggressive with such poise, which I think is what's made him so impressive this year. And I mean, I think obviously it's his to lose, but I think it's hard to see anyone else winning it now, to be honest.
Yeah, I think he's mature. He matured last year, but he's like properly matured now. We saw that with the 15, 16 laps when he was attacking Leclerc. He didn't go for a silly dive. He just kept the pressure on, knowing that you could either get him in the pit stop phase, or knowing that he could pressurize him into some kind of mistake. And one of those two things happened. So he's just got that smart head now, and he knows he doesn't have to race stupidly like he did at times last year. So that is the difference. And obviously his speed and talent is just top. So there's just, not unfortunate. He's just so difficult to beat.
Yeah, you get those kind of talismanic people through sport. You think, God, how's that person beatable? You had it with Marquez in MotoGP. I seem to think he's kind of the one I think of the most for that kind of figure. It's just like, well, he's just going to win. There's no way he can't win. And if Verstappen gets in the lead of a race, you kind of get the feeling, well, that's it.
Yeah.
At the moment. So yeah, that's why he's doing so well. That's why he won the race, and it's so well deserved. Joining him on the podium was obviously a double Merc podium, the first time since
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia. You're right. With Hamilton
Last year, Saudi Arabia, obviously not
yes,
this
of
year.
course, 21. Hamilton second, Russell third. Both drove very well. Hamilton in particular, in my opinion, and well-deserved podium for both of them. The team really the car seems to really come alive when it's on heavy fuel, which is awful for qualifying. But yeah, it's a race car.
Oh, sorry, Freddie, my internet one then.
I'll
talk about Mercedes. I'll just talk about Mercedes.
Talk about Mercedes.
Yeah, I thought Hamilton had a great weekend as well. He's been on it the last 3 or 4 races actually. And yeah, he got a good start. Took advantage of Perez not, quite being at one with the car, it seemed. And then he did his usual tyre management gloriousness, I guess. And then Russell made it a bit harder. But then he managed to jump Perez with a bit of luck because of the virtual safety car. So yeah, I think Hamilton has maximised his results in the last 4 races since Canada, and it's paying off. And I think he's going to win this weekend. So,
well, yeah,
that's my prediction.
Hungary. We'll get to the Hungary chat at the end. Let's save that. But you're stealing my thunder. But yeah, he's driven really well. He's in a really good run of form. He seems to have. I think it's so underappreciated the amount of work Hamilton does away from the car and away from the session, because I think his return to social media this year has really kind of given us a bit more with that. He, obviously, there's so many pictures of him in the paddock at 1 a.m. and him in the simulator before the race, even on Friday morning of Silverstone and that kind of thing. He's in the sim and he's just going for it. And I think he's really just worked harder to turn around his form, and he really has. And I think you're right. Since Canada, he's been brilliant. And yeah, the rub of fortune has been there in a way that it was there for Russell last time around, earlier in the season. But that's because what goes around comes around. But Hamilton, I think, has been excellent. I think that's my dog. Well,
your dog thinks the same thing.
Yeah, he thinks the same thing. I can't even stop him barking now. Monty, what do you think?
I'm not doing an impression of a dog.
I'm going to throw him outside my room. 1 second. I'll mute myself, and Nigel can talk about George Russell.
Yeah, Russell. Well, I want to speak about the incident actually with Russell. Because I'm interested to see what Freddie thinks. Because there were 2 incidents. There was the one with at the chicane, and then there was a virtual safety car one. The virtual safety car, if people don't know, it basically got reset. So that's why it was ending for twice as long as it should have. And Russell took advantage of that, and Perez lost out. Perez is a bit annoyed at that. He thought it was stolen, basically. But the incident at the chicane, Russell was complaining that Perez turned in on him. I just can't agree with it. I think Russell completely forced him off the track. That's how I see it. I don't see how Russell can complain. If anything, Russell should have got a penalty, I think, for that, because we saw it in Austria when the stewards were being quite harsh with drivers pushing each other off the track and being over aggressive. And I think for me, that's what Russell did. He went right to the edge of the track and forced Perez off. So if anything, he should have got a penalty. I think, calling it race incident is also just about okay, but I can't see why Russell can have any complaints about that. For me, he went down the inside, wasn't even ahead at any point, and forced him off. So that's my take of it.
I know exactly what you mean. I completely agree. And I think Russell's complaining was kind of just hang on a second, take a step back. You sent a dive bomb and went to the edge. Yes, you got it stopped, and yes, you stayed in the track, and that's fine. But the way it resulted was obviously Perez was forced off the track. And, I think if it had been gravel, Russell would have got a penalty, to be honest, because Perez...
If it was Verstappen, think about the different reaction, like the would have been. I know, like, we're in Britain and bias and that, but it would have been a completely different reaction. I'm 100% sure of it.
Oh, of course it would have been. Like, that was an absolute send, and it was, it's one of those really interesting ones because, yes, he got it stopped, but it's just the way he rolled out afterwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot more that could have been kind of. I think, yeah, Mercedes were very good with the way they handled him. Actually, I was very impressed with what his engineer and then actually Toto Wolff did say. They just said, kind of get your head down, it's not going to be investigated. And they seemed to kind of give the impression they agreed with the fact that it wasn't being penalized and stuff like that. And I think that kind of steadied the ship. And I think, yeah, the safety car thing, I don't know what you said about it, Nigel, because I was fiddling with a dog. Oh, God, that's an awkward sentence. I was...
That's going on the best bits next year. If
yeah, of course it is. But yeah, that seems to be a bit hard on Perez, in my opinion, because everything that's come out is an FIA hardware issue.
Yeah.
And George being able to kind of just have a bit more left in his delta, meaning he could just accelerate earlier.
It was complete luck. Like, anyone who's played the F1 game will understand why doing that. Anyone who's not played the F1 game, it's a bit difficult to explain, like, why do it accelerating and braking and going at racing speed and going at walking speed. But yeah, basically, Russell, you try to get momentum. You want to be on the throttle for as long as possible when the virtual safety car ends and it goes back to green. And like you said, Freddie, basically we got it for us twice as long as it should have been because of a hardware problem. And it was just pure luck that Russell happened to preempt it. But it paid off. So,
It paid off, yeah. And to be honest, if it is luck that you're trying those things out for the luck anyway. And the million times in a million it doesn't work. Well, I don't know what I'm saying there. The 99 times out of 100 it doesn't work, but the one time it does, you look like a hero, but you don't look like a non-hero when you just try it anyway. So it's fair enough. It's the right tactic to employ, and it worked out. And I think if it hadn't worked out, Russell would have fallen way back because the Merc struggles to heat up his tires, and Perez's late race pace after having an opportunity to cool down his tires was excellent after that. I think he was just really struggling with the way this car is working at the moment on the tires. He's been very open about that, and the team have been a little bit coy, but to the extent of not denying the way the car's moving towards Verstappen. So
not this. We've had this debate before.
Yes, I know we've had this debate before, but it's also the debate because it's what's happening. And that's fair enough because he's the one leading the championship by a million, billion.
And it's how you make the car faster.
Exactly. It's just leaning against one driver, it seems, just because of the way it works. And that's a bit of a shame, but obviously Perez was nowhere this weekend in comparison on race pace in comparison to Verstappen. I think he actually did a very good job in qualifying to get that close because he wasn't at all that close at any other stage this weekend. I think a third place would have been excellent for him, but I think the fourth place was more kind of representative for him this weekend.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I'd agree.
But then we get on to someone who could probably have been fourth or third, who was fifth with the fastest lap point, which is obviously the reason why he is in that position because he got a fastest lap point. Carlos Sainz, who represents the Ferrari strategy team who don't actually watch Formula One.
I'm sick to death of Ferrari strategy. It's a good thing we didn't do this podcast yesterday because I would have been punching my laptop or something. But it's just like, how could he read the race so wrong? This is like their paid job, Ferrari, and it's a strategy team. I just don't know what they're thinking. They couldn't have put Sainz in the worst position. It was just so kind of half-hearted what they did. Like, he pitted for mediums because of the safety car, ironically because of Leclerc's crash, his teammate. The front jack man, for some reason, doesn't release the car quick enough, so then he gets a 5-second time penalty, which causes this mess. and then for them to think, so then they have two options. They either risk it, try and make it to the end on the mediums, which it looks like he was going to do, and then he got past Perez, so he might as well risk it because he could have got a podium, or you try to maximise the final stint length by pitting for mediums with 15 or 20 laps to go, not 9 laps to go. It's just mind-boggling. Like, how can it be so bad? It's like this. Literally, they should hire you or me. Like it's just, it doesn't make any sense.
Don't put that pressure on us. It doesn't make sense, and it's okay to strategize on the fly, but don't strategize on the fly for 5 laps ago, because you got to look ahead, and they look behind too much, in my opinion. I just, back in Maranello, they're making a fantastic car, and it's being run on the racetrack by fantastic people. But
this is what I meant by change the strategist. This is exactly what they've got to change all of them. Get rid of them all. Get rid of them all tomorrow and bring a whole new lot in. Like, they might as well, because it's unacceptable. It's completely it's embarrassing. That's what it is. Absolutely embarrassing. The basics of strategy. It's not even complicated, this thing. It's just about looking at the stint length, looking at the tyres. They've got all the data there as well. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Oh yeah, it is. It's mad. And to call Sainz in when you've left him out so long, he's felt like what he has to do is to do it on track, when he could have just sat there and waited to come in. But he gets in, and now he's just like, oh well, now I come in. What a waste of time. And that's just annoying. And I mean, they probably would have finished only 5th, and with this 5-second penalty, but they thought, you know what, it's better to put him behind 5 cars and make him overtake them, because then he'll get a fastest lap point, maybe. I just found that just a bit too risky and older strategy. Just at least go for podium on track and be at least around that fight, because even whatever happens, something could happen.
Yeah, and I think my biggest problem is it's not a one-off thing. If this happens once or twice a season, I can live with that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just happened so many times this year.
Yeah.
Look at, this isn't even thinking about the engine problems that they've had recently as well. Monaco was just as bad as this with Leclerc as well. So it's just so frustrating.
Oh yeah, totally.
And they've got. I just don't know why it's happening. Is it pressure? Is it something else? Because they are smart people, obviously. That's why they're doing their jobs. But it can't be pressure though, because I don't know.
I don't think we can easily come up with a solution with an answer even.
I hope they can though. Like, if they can't, then they might as well forget it and give up.
No, I think they just need to think. That's all I can kind of come up with, and it just pains me to even think about them having to think. I don't get it. I don't get it. Because I'm like, they're very good at sticking to their guns, and once in a blue moon it works, like Austria. And who knows, it probably would have worked with Leclerc this weekend, but they're just, I don't know, that they have all these plan A, plan B, plan D, plan E, plan F, plan Q, but you can't always stick to a pre-prepared plan.
No.
And if you're going to be planning on the fly, you have to think about the race. You can't think about just one lap time on lap 48 that someone else did. Yeah, that's kind of the impression I get. I don't know if I'm being too kind of blasé with it, but yeah, that's the impression I get. And now I want to move on and never speak about them again. Because we should probably talk about the fact that it's probably the last French Grand Prix for the foreseeable.
Yes, I think it is. It's one of them, isn't it? Me and Adam talked a little bit about it in the preview, how, for me, I've said this when we did our Las Vegas announcement episode thing back in, what was that, April, March? It was a while ago, wasn't it now? April,
because the season is
April. Yeah, I said in that episode that the problem with Las Vegas and China returning and Qatar returning next year, Spa and France or Monaco, one of them or two of them are going to drop. And for me, I'd rather keep all of them, quite frankly, rather than have Las Vegas. And this is what we're seeing play out. We don't know about Spa yet, but yeah, doesn't like this is going to be the last French Grand Prix. And the thing is, he got 2 drivers at the moment on the current grid, Ocon and Gasly from France. The FIA is French. It's got a history of having the first Grand Prix. It's got Alpine, French team. So there's a lot going for it. Yes, the track isn't the best, but there's a lot of kind of attachments to it, and I quite like that for a Grand Prix. So in that I'm a bit disappointed. But
the words that are coming out of it is that Magny-Cours is being spoken to, as is a Nice street track, and even conversations in Paris, and also the Bugatti circuit at Le Mans, which I think would be interesting, to say the least. It's good for MotoGP. I think it would be really weird seeing Formula One cars down the start-finish straight at Le Mans. Let's be honest. For us motorsport anoraks, yes. But I don't think Formula One's not coming back to France anytime soon. I think the rotation calendar will fit in very nicely, and I think we're just gonna have to put up with having Magny-Cours one year and Spa the other. And I mean, I quite like both tracks. I think Spa is a bit better for a race, but these new cars could work quite well in Magny-Cours. Who knows? But that's a conversation for when the Winging It F1 podcast is old and grey. Because now the Winging It F1 podcast is young and fresh, and it's going to talk about that modern, hip, definitely not stuck in the Middle Ages politically country that is Hungary. Woo! Yes, we're back to Hungary, the site of one of last year's most hectic, crazy Grand Prix, and one of my favourite tracks on the calendar. Let's be honest, I really like the Hungaroring.
Which tracks don't you like, Freddie?
Let's not go into that because I do. I think there are a lot of meh tracks, but anyway, I do just really like the Hungaroring. And the name's great. It's called the Hungaroring. Come on. But anyway, Nigel, you kick us off because you think Lewis Hamilton's going to win. Is that based on previous record?
No, it's based on, because I said it after Silverstone about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I stand by it because that's what I do with F1. When it comes to F1, I'm stubborn. When it's not F1, I'm not stubborn. I'm just stupid.
I don't think you're very stubborn. I think you're way less stubborn than most people, most fans.
Yeah, I'm just a bit thick. But anyway, I think, yes, Mercedes was still half a second or so away in France, but there's something about the change of direction on the car that I think will work well in the middle sector. And the biggest weakness of the Mercedes is obviously the straight line speed because of a mixture of the drag and the aero and the power unit. And obviously Budapest is one of the least power sensitive circuits on the whole calendar, probably 3rd or 4th least power sensitive, I'd have thought.
It's getting more power sensitive because the
I think all tracks are, though, aren't they?
But, I don't know what these cars are going to be. I don't know whether these cars are going to make it really mechanically downforce sensitive now, which I think is really cool to see.
But I just think, I don't know, I think if there's a bit of rain there as well, I've just got a feeling.
It's going to be hot.
It's going to be hot. It still might rain though, because you never know. When you went in 2018, it suddenly rained from nowhere, didn't it? So
yep, they did. I noticed in the grandstand.
So I don't know. I've just, for once, I can't explain it. It's just a feeling. And usually when it comes to F1, I can give a decent explanation. But I think the ingredients are there for Mercedes, and if they bring an upgrade and it works, then I think something can happen. And turn 1 and turn 2 is quite tight as well. So on the opening lap, as we saw last year, it can get a bit feisty. I know last year was wet, but even if the Leclerc and Verstappen are battling, they could get quite close, and there's that aspect as well. So I just think there's a lot of variables which, if they come together, Hamilton can keep up his streak of winning every season that he's competed in.
I think it's set up to be an interesting one. I'm not going to throw in any crazy predictions because I don't know how at all it's going to work out. I would probably only say that I think Ferrari could go quite well there.
It should be 1-2 Ferrari. On paper, it should be 1-2 Ferrari.
And that's why I think something weird's going to happen. So we'll have to wait and see. It's going to be a really interesting one, I think. And I think these new cars, I think Hungary is going to be a really interesting track to see them at, in a way that like the Imola sprint race was. I think Hungary is going to be a really interesting one to see as a dry trial. So to be honest, I get excited by that kind of thing. Just seeing like, ooh, how's it going to be? How are they going to be in the final corner in comparison to last year? Where it was very tricky to be able to follow, but let's see. I think it'll be very interesting. I think people will be surprised at how good the fighting is. I hope they are, bloody hell. But anyway, we don't have anything more to add on this podcast now.
I think the midfield was quite quiet. Well, they didn't show much of it for a start.
They didn't show much of it because it was tense up front. But
yeah, exactly.
Midfield, I think you had. Let me do a rundown of it.
Very quickly. Alonso had a great race, had a great start, and then controlled it. Ocon moved up a few places as well,
even with a penalty from a deserved penalty for
Joe. Norris had a bit of debris stuck in his. Norris had a bit of debris stuck in his car at the end, but didn't make a difference to his position. Then after that, it was the usual. Like, there was no surprises really. There was a Stroll Vettel thing in the last lap, which was a bit.
Stroll Vettel thing. What
silly.
you make on it? Was it clever driving?
No, on your teammate, you shouldn't be doing that.
Like,
it was a bit too much. Over the limit.
Teammate, but it was kind of good defending, I think. I think maybe it was a little bit. I think maybe Vettel's line was a little bit too away from it, but I think parking the bus is kind of just normal defending.
Yeah.
Look at Perez in Abu Dhabi last year. But it was a bit aggressive for the last lap of your team, which you don't get any points with. But yeah. Anything else you want to add? Haas, sad?
Yes, I forgot about that. Yes.
They should have got points this weekend. It's a shame Magnussen had to take a penalty because his pace was rocket worthy.
But other than that, I think we've done a nice little quick rundown of people. Joe deserved his 5-second penalty for punting Mick Schumacher. Who else exists?
I can't remember too. I've had there's been too much time in between now and the race. We've got work.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll go back to work now when this gets published.
Yeah, we go back to work. God, it's 6 a.m.
It's 8 in the evening. Bloody hell. All right. Yes, we're going to sign off, and you can enjoy this in your sub boxes when it's public. And we'll see you after the Hungarian Grand Prix, where we enter the summer break, and Max Verstappen has already clinched the World Championship. Have a good evening. Have a good day, wherever you are. And bye-bye.